Welcome to Roadshow's AutoComplete, your weekly rundown of all the best news that's happening in the automotive world. I'm Tim Stevens, editor-in-chief of Roadshow. Brian Cooley is my usual co-host, but he's off on assignment this week, so we've recruited the great Emmy Hall to join us. Emmy, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm not, well, actually, I am great because you just said I was. So thank you so much for that introduction. I'm glad to be here for my first AutoComplete with you.
It's going to be great. We've got a lot of great new to go through, and I'm going to stop saying the word great now and move on to something which isn't so great. It's becoming a bit of a running theme for us. Dieselgate is still ongoing. We had a couple different updates on Dieselgate this week. I'm going to start with basically what is an unfortunate thing is that the deadline is coming up for the U.S. government to approve the fixes that Volkswagen has put forward, but ultimately we're being told that they may not actually be in place for months to come. March 24th is the deadline for the fix that Volkswagen has provided to be approved, and that has been pushed on to both the EPA and the California Air Resources Board. However, a Volkswagen representative said this week that we shouldn't expect to see the fix actually implemented in consumers' cars for many months to come. I mean, I think people are getting a little bit frustrated about all the back and forth on this, and a lot of people are just looking for some answers. It seems like there may be maybe even longer way to go.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I know that you can look in the comments of all the articles that we've posted about these, and people that actually own TDRs are so upset that the value of their cars is continually getting lower and lower and lower, and they have no option. There's no fix in sight. I know that Volkswagen did have one fix into the EPA and CARB, and it was kind of smacked down from them. So we'll see. I mean, March 24th is coming up. There's no end in sight to this whole thing. I mean, Volkswagen is just having trouble after trouble after trouble. And now we see that Michael Horn, the CEO of Volkswagen USA, has just left mutually, whatever that means. And, he really did lead Volkswagen through the start of this scandal. And now he's been ousted. So we'll see who his successor is going to be.
Yeah, it remains to be seen exactly what went down there. As we mentioned, Volkswagen did say this was a mutual parting, but ultimately did come apart in a very rapid sort of way where we got a press release and suddenly he was gone.
Right.
Those sorts of things tend to point to things being maybe a little bit less than mutual or maybe a little one-sided anyway.
Yeah.
But Michael Horn was definitely a strong advocate for the dealers here in the U.S. He was definitely trying to do everything he could to make the dealers comfortable, to make sure that they felt that they were going to be supported by Volkswagen U.S. through this entire term. Now, he is, of course, the CEO of Volkswagen America, which means it's pretty unlikely that he had anything to do actually with Dieselgate itself.
Yeah.
But it's possible that Volkswagen isn't really happy with how Volkswagen America has been handling this this whole saga so far. But again, we're kind of speculating at this point. It's hard to know.
Yeah, and he was the one that came out the day after Dieselgate was announced. The very next day, they were doing a press event for the new, I think it was the Passat in New York. I mean, literally the very next day. And that guy had to go on stage in front of all of these angry journalists and say, yo, we screwed up. So, you have to give him props for that because that was probably not easy and very, very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, he was placed into a very, very unfortunate, very, very difficult situation. And again, he had all the dealers loving them. In fact, there's a report in the New York Times this morning that dealers are a little bit nervous now about what exactly is going to come because, again, he was the one who was saying that we'll take care of the dealers. We'll make sure that you guys have the incentives that you need to keep selling these cars to make sure that we can keep things moving. With somebody else coming in, well, the dealers at least are a little bit nervous. We also had a report this week that a CARB representative, again from California, saying that maybe a full fix won't even be possible for these cars, basically stating that it may make more sense to simply have fines put in place and to push Volkswagen to go in other directions rather than spending billions and billions of dollars trying to fix all of these cars that are on the road right now that are not compliant with today's regulations. So even if we do get a fix, it may not be a complete fix, which is, again, a little bit depressing.
Yeah, everyone who had come to me and said, hey, I commute a lot. I really need a car that gets good MPGs. I'm going to get a hybrid. What hybrid should I get? And I would say, no, get a TDI. Get a TDI. They're so much better. They're so much more fun. They've got all this torque. They're really great cars. And now I kind of feel like I'm eating my words with that. And so for Jimmy Jack, I'm really sorry. I recommended for you to get a TDI.
It's definitely a difficult game that we have because, of course, people, when they find out that we write about cars, the first thing they want to know is which car should I buy, and you don't really plan for these sorts of things. When you're thinking about cars, you think about miles per gallon, you think about reliability. You don't think that maybe there's been a vast internal corporate conspiracy to undermine U.S. emissions regulations, and that makes things a little bit tricky, to say the least.
Yes, it does, Tim.
But anyway, again, to anybody who was misled by any automotive journalist out there, we apologize. We're definitely going to keep continuing this story as closely as we can because I know there are a lot of people concerned about everything from, of course, people concerned about resale value on their cars. There's also a lot of concern about whether or not these cars are even legal to continue driving in the U.S. because if you have a state with emissions tests as part of your inspections, maybe these aren't compliant. So that's a big question on the minds of a lot of people. And I guess we'll wait and see what comes to pass. But again, it may be we've got at least weeks until they've got to approve the proposed fix by Volkswagen. It could be again months until we find out something formal. So stay tuned for that. All right, in better news, we've got some fuel economy ratings for the Chrysler Pacifica, which was one of the hottest cars of Detroit, oddly enough, and it is a minivan. And Emmy, I don't know about you, but I was actually pretty excited about the car at the time. It's good to get a little bit more information about it.
Yeah, I never thought that I would be excited about a minivan, but this one is pretty fly, I gotta say. And it is almost, the Honda Odyssey has got the best fuel ratings of the minivan class, but this one is really, really close up there. It's 18 in the city, 28 on the highway, and 22 combined, and that pretty much matches the Odyssey except for 1 mile per gallon in the city. So it is just chomping on the heels of that Odyssey.
Yeah, it's very, very close. And this, of course, is not the plug-in hybrid version, which is what we were also pretty excited about to see in Detroit. That car will go 30 miles on a charge, basically, before it even switches over to gas. So they are expecting 80 miles per gallon equivalent on that. But we haven't seen the EPA ratings on that just yet, so that'll be even better. But yeah, that's good news. It's definitely looking like it'll go head-to-head or toe-to-toe with the Odyssey. You can line up all your kids, and they can all go toe-to-toe with the Odyssey. So it should be a good choice. Again, it's a pretty good-looking car. I think the launch event's happening in the not-too-distant future, so we should have some more impressions on that in the near future. But yeah, it's definitely a little bit interesting to see. There's been a lot of back-and-forth discussion about the naming of the thing, not continuing on with the town and country legacy, effectively, and whether or not people are willing to pay for a premium minivan. I think that some people will, but there's still a bit of a stigma about the whole minivan thing. What do you think, Emmy? Will people pay extra for a high-end minivan?
Well, you are getting a lot of features with the Pacifica. You've got the vacuum cleaner because once the Odyssey put a vacuum cleaner in their car, like you have to have one now in every single minivan ever for all those Cheerios. But yeah, it's got a vacuum cleaner. It's got the stow and go seating. It's got a foot activated tailgate and the sliding doors. So yeah, I think that it's got a lot of features that gives it a good value. What I really like about it is the fact, like you said, is that you can go 30 miles an hour, 30 miles on a single electric charge in the plug-in hybrid version. And all I can picture is like your kids in the back in their car seats, and you just put it in all electric version, just slam on the accelerator and just watch that instant torque take you off, and your kids go, "Wow, this is the best day ever!"
Or you can drive very slowly and keep them asleep, and maybe that'll make for a nicer, quieter drive back from daycare too.
I guess if that's how you want to run your life, that's fine.
And there's also rear seat GPS for your kids too, which is a pretty neat feature. So basically, your kids can see how far they are along the way to grandma's house without having to ask you every 30 seconds and do their best Bart Simpson impression.
Yes, it's always good to introduce kids to geography and maps.
And touchscreens too, as early as possible. So again, Pacifica, 18 city, 28 highway, 22 combined, making it one of the most fuel-efficient minivans in the market. And again, it's only going to get better with the plug-in hybrid, which we're going to have to wait and see how that shakes out. And more news on the fuel economy side of things. We got basically what's a look at the average fuel economy across the industry for February. This was put together by the University of Michigan's Transportation Research Institute, easy for me to say. February's average MPG across the country was 25.2 miles per gallon, which is the same as it was in January. And actually, that's pretty flat over 2015. In fact, it's an improvement over the end of 2015. But overall, we're actually down a little bit over the past few years. We've seen significant updates, or increases, I should say, since 2010. We're up about 4 or 5 miles per gallon. But things have been pretty flat, and that pretty much goes directly in line with gas prices. I mean, do you think that with gas prices holding and in many places going cheaper, are we going to see miles per gallon going down into the teens again as they were not too long ago?
Man, it's tough to say. I always know that you always know that gas prices are going to go up. You know it in your mind, but sometimes it's hard to know that in your heart when the 707 horsepower Challenger Hellcat is like screaming your name, right? But I saw gas in Texas when I was there for a drive at $1.45 a gallon, and I saw it on the East Coast for $1.75. And it's really like you want to believe, right? I must believe, I want to believe that these prices are going to stay, and consumers I think have a positive outlook on this. So we might see those numbers go down just a little bit.
Yeah, and it remains to be seen exactly what that's going to mean for companies like Tesla, who, of course, built a business around the idea of getting away from fuel. And, of course, there are so many advantages beyond just fuel economy and cost when it comes to buying an EV, talking about saving the environment, lack of maintenance, and all sorts of other good things. But certainly when people are pricing out a hybrid or an EV, they're looking at how much gas costs and how much is going to save them. And if gas keeps getting cheaper, that's making that equation a little bit harder to balance.
For sure.
But ultimately, we'll keep an eye on that as well. I'm definitely, curious about if we do hit the bottom. We've got to hit the bottom at some point here, right? It can't just keep going down. We've got to hit a peak at some point. But maybe this is another conspiracy. Maybe they're just trying to kill off EVs altogether. And Tesla, maybe that'll be the theme of the show. How many conspiracy theories can we point out to
Oh
before
my
the
gosh.
end of the episode?
In 20 years, some documentary filmmaker is going to come back to this podcast and say, Tim Stevens called it.
Blew the lid off the whole thing. If indeed they can find it, maybe it'll be deleted by some other conspiracy. All right, we're going to take a break, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about some cool cars we've seen this week, including a very interesting concept car I saw in Germany with flexible fenders. Stay tuned for that. Welcome back to Roadshow's AutoComplete, your weekly look at the top news. We've got a couple of great things on Roadshow this week at theroadshow.com for you to check out. Our first drive in the brand new Mercedes-Benz E-Class. This is their high-tech, mid-level sedan, but they've got a lot of technology, automated functionality. You can change lanes with your hands off the steering wheel. All sorts of good stuff. Our first drive of that car. We've also got our first take of the Bentley Bentayga, a great video from Carfection. This is, of course, Bentley's big SUV with some pretty decent off-road credibility. A beautiful video from Carfection, as always, of the Bentayga. Emmy, can I get your thoughts on the Bentayga while we're here, actually? What do you think about a luxury off-roader, being a bit of an off-roader yourself?
It's such an interesting concept to off-road in luxury, right? Because most of the time you're either freezing or you're sweating and your seatbelt is chafing you and you're not listening to music and the seats are uncomfortable. I mean, there's so much about off-roading that's all about kind of bringing the nature and the outside into your car. And with this Bentley, I mean, I just don't see that happening. And I feel like it would be so strange to be in that and then to be like going through the mud or going up a dune. And I would be so petrified of hurting the car. But having said that, I have seen some reports that say that it's very, very capable off-road, which is surprising. So, I would love to try it out in Glamis. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I think we can all get behind the idea of a luxury SUV. Bentley already makes big cars to begin with, so to raise it up a couple of inches, it's not the end of the world. And a lot of people, they want to have an SUV to go along with their sedan or their coupe, and so Bentley saw a need in the market, and they filled it, and that's great. But for them to also then to focus on this off-road capability is a little bit interesting for sure. Yeah, like you mentioned, going through the mud in an off-roader is a lot of fun, but what if you get stuck in the mud and you have to get out, and your $300 Italian leather loafers might get a little bit dirty? That could be a problem. I'm a little bit, I'm of course wondering how many Bentley Bentayga owners will actually take their cars proper off-roading. I guess that remains to be seen. But anyway, it's good to know that the car can do it, that you're maybe getting a little bit more of your money's worth. But definitely check out that Carfection video. It is, as always, with Carfection, a beautiful thing. Another beautiful thing this week is the BMW Vision Next 100. This is BMW's centennial year. They turned 100 years old on March 7th. And so I was actually in Munich this week checking out their new concept car called the Vision Next 100. This is a car that's going to point us forward to the next 100 years of motoring. No, this is not what BMW thinks that cars will be like in 100 years. They're thinking more around the 2030, 2040 timeframe. It's a pretty interesting concept. It's got a lot of basically nods toward an autonomous future, an interior that really reconfigures itself based on one of two driving modes. The first mode is called Boost, where you're actually driving the car, and they've got a steering wheel, and everything is pretty predictable and pretty normal. If you go into Ease mode, the steering wheel actually folds up into the dashboard, a little bit like the Volvo concept we saw in LA last year. The whole interior reconfigures a little bit, and the lighting also changes, so the whole car kind of changes color to not only show you which mode you're in, but show everyone around you which mode that you're in. You can then kind of sit back in the seats, you can relax a little bit, you can talk with your companions within the car. And it's got some other neat features too. They really wanted to push the envelope with fuel economy, and so rather than having cutouts for the wheels and the fenders, they actually made the fenders flexible. So as you turn the wheel, the fenders move and flex with the car, which actually worked on the concept. I got to see it up close, and it was kind of mind-blowing, to be honest with you. But I mean, I don't know, but one of the first thoughts in my mind was, what do you do when you're driving in the snow and the fenders pack up? That's going to be a bit of a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I read your article and I saw a lot of the videos that came out of this, and it was very disconcerting when you see that fender move, and it just looks like it looks like a snake that's moving through the desert, and especially with that triangle motif that they have there on the along the body of the BMW concept. It's very, very disconcerting, but it's kind of cool. I was really
very
impressed.
cool.
Yeah,
And it's oddly organic to see it. And yeah, when the first time I saw it up close, it definitely took me aback. But they've got some other neat things. The dashboard, for example, there are these little triangles that kind of pop up on the dashboard to give you some warnings. So if someone, for example, steps out in front of you, or if the computer thinks someone is going to step out in front of you, it'll flash these little triangles up on the dashboard in 3D to give you something to look at, to kind of bring your eye to that driver, the bicyclist, or whatever else is about to step in front of you, to bring your attention to them so that you can then stop the car. or of course the car will stop itself if you don't do it quickly enough. The full windshield is a projection-based heads-up display with gesture control. So it'll give you, if you're in ease mode, for example, and the car's driving itself, it'll highlight any sort of local attractions, restaurants, that kind of thing. And you can just kind of point to the thing that you want. It'll give you reviews, and the car can then take you right to it. So it's an interesting evolution of the gesture control we're seeing in the 7 Series. Again, looking about 20, 30 years down the road, I think it sounds kind of nice, actually, to be able to have your cake and eat it, too.
Yeah, as I was driving in today, San Francisco traffic is terrible. And all I could think was, man, if I could put this car in autonomous mode right now, I could get so much work done instead of just sitting here for an hour and a half. And it's great that BMW recognizes that, they're a driving pleasure driven company, right? So they're going to make sure that any autonomous car that they have is also going to be able to be driven by the human being, because driving is also fun. Yes, sometimes it's a chore, but it's also fun, and it also means freedom and independence. And most people, I think, don't want that taken away from them. So I think it's great that with this concept, they are definitely saying, look, you can have the car drive itself. You can drive it when it's fun and when it's easy. And then, it makes your life easier all the way around.
And it was honestly a bit of a surprise to me that they even had a steering wheel in this thing at all, thinking about 20, 30 years down the road. You could envision that being a time where maybe cars are just driving themselves altogether. But yeah, it's definitely good to see BMW sticking with the idea that this is the ultimate driving machine. You can still have fun in the thing and ultimately have it take you to work or home or wherever else you want to go. But Mercedes-Benz was wanting to get in on the action too. BMW again celebrating their centennial this year, 100 years in operation. Mercedes-Benz, as part of that celebration, tried to butt in on it and said basically any BMW factory worker or any other employee of BMW can come to the Mercedes-Benz Museum and get a free admission, they said, so that you can get the complete history of the automobile. And Mercedes-Benz, of course, pointing to the idea that they are older than BMW. They've been around for about 130 years now. A little bit cheeky of Mercedes-Benz, and not really that common a thing for German auto manufacturers who are usually so straight-laced to be kind of poking fun at each other like that.
Well, if you remember back to the Super Bowl in 2013, I think, when the Mercedes-Benz Superdome lights went out. Do you remember that?
I do.
Audi immediately put up a tweet that said that they were sending LEDs to Mercedes-Benz. So, I love it. I think it's great to see car companies having a little bit of fun with each other. One other thing that Mercedes-Benz said that they would do is that they would give priority parking to any BMW, so that they would have a bunch of BMWs lined up out in front of the Mercedes-Benz Museum. I think it's awesome. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Well, if you work for BMW and you find yourself in Stuttgart this week, definitely make sure you get by and get yourself free admission to the museum, which is quite nice. I've actually now been to both BMW's museum and Mercedes museum, and I won't say which is my favorite, but they're both quite nice. Although I will say BMW's museum has a lot of beautiful motorcycles in it, which Mercedes-Benz does not have. So there you go.
One extra thing for you.
BMW. Subaru this week showed off a new, what they're calling their global platform for 2017. I'm a Subaru owner myself, so I can say this confidently. Usually not really a cutting-edge company when it comes to technology. But Subaru did step forward and say that this is the new platform on which most of their cars will be built going forward. And for the first time, it is fully compatible with electric systems, hybrid systems, and gasoline systems. So Subaru now has a really solid base to build upon going forward. They can actually start to build some EVs, and Subaru really hasn't gone there. They've really barely dipped their toe into the hybrid side of things as well. So that's good news. It'll be a little bit lower, lower center of gravity, greater rigidity. Ultimately should be a good foundation for a new generation of Subarus.
Yeah, when I first read this and I read about the fact that it was going to be a much more rigid and a lower center of gravity platform, the first thing I thought was, okay, what is this going to do to the WRX and the STI?
Yeah.
How is this going to improve those driving dynamics of these sedans that are already really, really, really fun to drive? So I'm kind of excited for the next generation of WRX now.
I am too, and we should get a good preview of that here in the New York Auto Show, which is coming up in just a couple of weeks. That's traditionally been the place where Subaru unveils the new Impreza, the new WRX, the new STI, and so forth. And indeed, they gave us a teaser image this week of the new Impreza, which is going to be unveiled there in New York in just a couple of weeks. Now, that, of course, probably won't be the WRX version. We may have to wait a year from that, and then they'll probably have to wait another year for the STI version, which is typically how they do these sorts of things. But ultimately, it is good to see that there is a new generation Impreza. I don't know. You want to take bets, Emmy? Do you think they'll have a wagon version, or are they going to stick us with just the sedan?
Oh man, I hope they give us a wagon. Wagons are just so much more cool. They give you so much more utility. But just knowing that they've cut out the STI wagon, I'm probably just going to get the sedan.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised too. I'm, as I said, a big Subaru fan. I have an STI wagon myself, and I'm very glad that I got one because it was the last year that they made the things, and
Yeah.
they went to sedan only, and I would have been very sad if I couldn't have gotten that. So Subaru, give us more wagons, we want them. But definitely, I'll be there. Usually in the basement in Kobo, but I'll be there, Subaru, to see the new Impreza. I've got high hopes, so don't let me down. We've seen the concept Imprezas. I think at the Tokyo Motor Show they showed that off first, and it looks pretty good. So fingers crossed.
Yay.
All right, and our final bit of news this week. Good news for you Mustang owners, particularly if you spent the extra bucks and got yourself a GT350 or the pricier GT350R. You can now get yourself a free day of training at the, let's see, it is now called the Utah Motorsports Campus. It was formerly Miller Motorsports Park, one of the best motorsports facilities in the U.S. in Tooele, Utah. So if you are anywhere near the Midwest or Western Midwest, wherever, I guess, is that Western Midwest?
Did you
What's
say
the category?
Western Midwest?
I'm not sure what exactly you call Utah, honestly.
Utah's the West.
The mountain states.
Yeah, Utah's the West. It's in the Rockies. It's the West.
If you're willing to go to Utah and you have a GT350 or a 350R, you get a full day of training to teach you how to drive the thing, which is great. I think more companies should do this with
I
their
do
cars.
too.
The GT350, that's a lot of horsepower going through the rear wheels, and it's a great idea.
Yeah, and you don't even need to drive your own car to the track. You can fly in, grab your hotel room, and they will give you loaners. But yeah, I mean, when you get into a new car like that that has so much horsepower, the last thing that you want to do is wreck it while you're driving out of the dealership, right? And even cars, even lower horsepower cars like the Fiat Abarth, you can get a track day with that as well once you buy that car. And I think it's something that me as a driver, if I got a GTR or if I got a 350, the first thing I would do was call an instructor and be like, hey man, we got to get this thing around the track in the best way. And I got to figure out how to handle all this horsepower because it can be very, very dangerous if you're in the wrong hands. And you're only going to enjoy your car more if you know how to really, really drive it.
Right. You will be amazed at the limits of cars like that. Yeah. And you really can't even come close to appreciating them on the street alone. So absolutely, if you've bought this car, get yourself out to Utah, to Tooele, Utah. That's Tooele, by the way. It's a little bit hard to spell. But ultimately, get yourself out there and take advantage of that free day. It's, again, one of the best motorsports facilities in the U.S. And I'm glad to see it's fully operational again because there was a little bit of a doubt about the future of that place. So it's good to see. All right. I do want to ask you before we go, Emmy, can you give us a little bit of a rundown of what you've got coming up in a couple weeks with the Gazelle Rally?
Yeah. So I am off to Morocco for the Gazelle Rally, which is a 9-day all-female off-road rally through the Sahara with no GPS. So everything is done with a compass and a map, and points are awarded for shortest distance between checkpoints, not fastest time. So it's all about driving in as straight a line as possible. And there could be anything in your way. There could be dunes or a river or a cliff. And you have to decide, am I going to try to drive through that or am I going to try to navigate around it? And once I navigate around it, how am I going to get back on my heading to find these checkpoints? So
probably if it's a cliff, better to go around, I assume?
Well, it depends on your vehicle, right? Like I'm driving a 2007 Defender 110. So I'm not really afraid of any cliffs. Depending on how high they are. Like small cliffs I can go down.
Cliffs we're talking about.
But so Roadshow will be covering that, so we'll get some great video off of it. You can follow the rally on gazellerally.com. I am team 178, and there are 9 American teams this year. And we're very, very confident that we're going to have some teams in the top 5, and I'm going to be one of them.
That's awesome. Well, you definitely have the best of luck from me, Emmy. I hope you have a great time, and I hope you have great success, and I hope you don't go driving off of any unexpected cliffs that are bigger than your Defender can handle. That's it for the week of news here at Roadshow's AutoComplete. Again, check us out at theroadshow.com if you haven't already, and we'll be back next week for another rundown. Roadshow AutoComplete. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.